E iho ana o luna e pia no lalo e huina na moku e kua na kapaia. E iho ana o luna e pia no lalo e huina na moku e kua na kapaia. E iho ana o luna e pia no lalo e huina na moku e kua na kapaia. Felina mai ke aloha ka Aina kākou. Woohoo! Mahalo for joining us on our for Aloha Kuamoʻo Aina, our web Walaʻau series, KuaMoʻolelo, and going to be one fun evening. Hope everybody's got their little poo-poos and pauhanas, whatever it is you're doing in your home. Enjoy. We get a chance to kind of talk stories. So my name is Kamanamaikalani. I'm the lead servant for Aloha Kuamoʻo Aina, and I'm really happy to be here joining you folks. And a little bit about AKA. We started in 2015. So we're a young fledgling organization, but our mission is really to try to promote Aloha Aina as consistent with the moʻolelo and values of Kuamoʻo. And we have goals to achieve justice, peace for our Aina, our people, and our environment in the world. So that's some of the work we do. And this is our 4-part series. So this is episode 2. If you want to go check out episode 1, you can look on our Instagram and Facebook. But this is part 2, and this is on Aina Matters. Our conversations are really conversations with kiaʻi, ʻŌiwi scholars, kiaʻi vai, working to make change across our pai Aina, and developing deeper understandings and aloha, for it is why we do what we do. So mahalo nui. And before we get into tonight's topic, a little bit of housekeeping stuff. So we give a raffle. Woohoo! Everybody, you can go and sign up for our raffle. So mahalo Native Books for their donations. And we have some of that here. So you can go ahead and register. You should receive 1 entry for registering. And please stick around to the end of our episode tonight. And you'll get the link to take the survey about the webinar. And this survey enters you into the raffle. So getting down into it. So this episode 2, Aina Matters. And we're going to explore, why does Aina matter for us? And for us as Kanaka, we understand Aina is our kupuna, our ancestor. And we know it is our kuleana to care for our elders, our precious hulu kupuna. And, the reality really is that for generations, and especially, since the overthrow, our movement has been around and dedicated to caring for our resources. And tonight we have some incredible me'e, my personal me'e, Aloha Aina, to be honest. And people who have really dedicated, their personal and professional lives to working towards justice on many of these Aina issues. And so it's really my privilege tonight to introduce them. And let's start with Auntie Noinoy Wong-Wilson. She's a retired assistant professor from Hawaiian Studies at Hilo Community College. She also ran student services. She is the executive director of Lalakea Foundation. She's a founding author and member of Aina Aloha Economic Futures. She's a tutu, a native Hawaiian cultural practitioner, a kiaʻi kupuna of our Mauna Awakea. Aloha nui, Auntie Noinoy. Maybe can you share just a little bit about yourself and where you're from? Nohea mai oe kain.
Aloha Kamana, and I also want to say aloha to the other people on this webinar tonight. Walter and Kapuaʻala, good to see you. So yes, I'm Noinoy Wong-Wilson. I live now here in Hilo, Hawaii. I am originally from Kailua, Oahu, and my family ventured from the island of Maui. So I have roots actually throughout the islands, like many of us, right? We have family in Ohana everywhere, family on Kauai as well. So I want to say aloha to everybody who signed on tonight to listen to us. And I hope that what we share with you will be inspiring and interesting at least. So thank you for being here. So I have been here on Hawaii Island where my father was born. I moved here about 33 years ago with my family because for us, with my young family at the time, I wanted my children to grow up closer to the Aina than I thought they were experiencing where we lived in Kaneohe, which is where a lot of my family comes from and lives. But it just got a little too busy for me. The Oahu scene, um, the hours spent commuting from home to Honolulu for work and school. And I think the pressures that I saw at the time, so this was in the late 80s, on the kids to do other things. I used to tell my daughter I didn't want her to grow up in um, in the shopping center or the shopping malls. I wanted them to grow up on Aina like I did, growing up on the windward side and camping often, spending summers and holidays living on the beach with family and really being a lot closer to the Aina than I think kids tend to nowadays, unless they live in very rural areas. So that was important to me at the time, and we moved to Hawaii Island for that reason, and have been here ever since. So Kamana introduced a little bit of my background. The only thing I want to add to that, Kamana, is that I had started a Native Hawaiian student support program at the community college. So I don't want anybody seeing that happens to be listening to think that I'm claiming to have headed up all of student services. but that was part of my studies, and part of my teaching was about the importance of Aina to us as Kanaka, and even in the community college setting, how important that identity was to the success of our haumana. So we talk about that a little bit later, but yeah, mahalo.
Mahalo for joining us, Auntie Noinoy, and yeah, opening up rich conversation already. So mahalo. So I have the privilege to introduce our next panelist, Uncle Walter Ritte, Molokai community leader, founding member of Protect Koʻolave Ohana, the Hui Alaloa, founding member of Hui Kuapā, founding OHA trustee, and now the executive director of Aina Momona. I don't even need to introduce any of our panelists, but Uncle Walter, maybe would you be willing to share just a little bit about yourself and no he mai oi?
Yes. Mahalo nui. Well, I'm kind of a wanderer. I was born on Maui, raised on Molokai, went to school on Oahu. I went to a school for Hawaiians. And today that school is trying to be a Hawaiian school. Because when we were going to school in the 60s, we were all taught to be Americans, full on. So I'm really glad to see the changes that are going on now. So of course, in my introduction, I got to do some politics. So that was my little jab at Kamehameha schools. Basically, I don't know. I started off on the wrong foot on Molokai, got all the politicians mad with me because I was not satisfied with the status quo. So I was forced to feed my family by hunting because I couldn't get a job on Molokai, even though I graduated from Kamehameha School, 3 years at university, and couldn't get a job on Molokai. So that put me in a different category on Molokai. I was lucky to have married a really good wahine from Kauai, and she was not looking for bright lights and nightclubs and stuff. So we got along really well. And I'm thinking that my whole life has been based on my need to be close to the Aina, to stay alive, to feed my family. It has become something that has allowed me to stay on that track for the last 50 years. And I'm still on that track. And I'm still as happy as I first was when I got on the track. And I've seen some good stuff happen over the years. And I see how much more that needs to be done. And I see the next generation coming up and greeting each other with, hey, aloha Aina. And that just blows my mind, you know? So this whole business of us using aloha Aina to defeat the United States military has become something so deep that it's actually becoming a greeting and part of the everyday conversations in the Hawaiian community. So there's huge hope for us as Hawaiians as far as I'm concerned. So that's my introduction.
Wow, mahalo nui, Uncle Walter. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Our third panelist is my good friend, Me'e, Hawaiian rights attorney for Hawaii. So many things Kapua is. She's a lawyer, a professor of law, director of Kahuliʻau Center for Excellence in Native Hawaiian Law, former Earth Justice attorney, and one of really our foremost experts in Native Hawaiian law and legal rights. So mahalo nui for joining us, Kapua. Maybe you can share. No hea mai oi.
She's all of our good friends. We all have good friends. She's all our good friends.
Oh, aloha mai. What an honor. It's, to just be in this presence of greatness with all of you folks for whom I have so much aloha. Really, I'm just a simple girl from the country. I'm zooming in from Kalihiwai, Kauai, which is at the edge of the freshwater with its kewai and meheo winds, where my mother's ohana has been for about 6 generations. And before that, our people came from Limahuli, and before that, Kalalau, since the time of Laʻai mai kahiki. My dad's ohana is from Honokaniki, Hawaii Island, so we span the whole ʻāina. Kauai has really changed a lot over the years, but when I was growing up, it was still pretty undeveloped. I'm proud to come from a ʻāina family of fishers and farmers. My papa, my mom's dad, was a konahiki for various things in Kalihiwai, for mullet and akule, for he'e from Hanapai to Anini. So when I grew up, we were, like Uncle said, very close to the Aina. We gathered or grew a lot of what ended up on our dinner tables. And now it's cool to be ʻāina. That wasn't the case. I mean, I remember my uncle was talking about how his cousins used to tease him, we're the ʻāina, the branch of the family, because we all still lived on Kauai and everybody else moved to Oahu, and how he was ashamed. But I'm so grateful for the way that I was raised, because, we're so proud to be Maoli and really grounded in our culture, which has just been a critical pico, I think, for so many things. And I joked that I kind of grew up holding sign, but I did. My dad went to high school with Uncle Walter, and I think both of them were ahead of their times in so many ways. My parents were really engaged in speaking truth to power and working with community. And today my dad testified before the Kauai Planning Commission against permits for this mega mansion that he litigated the contested case for 40 years ago. So it's really just been, I think, part of our DNA in doing this work. And as Kamana said, I've had the great privilege of working with good people at Earth Justice, at Kahuliʻau, but the truth of the matter is I just kind of work for Kamana. It's kind of like my boss. So at Kahuliʻau, we are an academic center. So we promote education, scholarship, community outreach, and collaboration on issues of law, culture, and justice, not just for us as Kanaka, but for other Pacific and Indigenous people. We're training our students to serve the lahui, to represent folks like Uncle Walter. We've had the great privilege of representing him in clinic so many times, which has just been transformational. So I think, like so many folks, I wear lots of hats in our community, but at heart, I'm just a simple girl from the country. And mahalo for the privilege of being here with all of you.
Mahalo, Kapua. And truth be told, any lives I come back in the future, I want to be on Kapua's team. So just in the future, whatever happens, remember that, okay? And okay, so mahalo for our introductions, and everybody out there. We can see we have amazing panelists, rooted in Aina, and already bringing up some of the challenges of our time that they've addressed. And so to frame our conversation tonight, I wanted to begin framing a little bit, the kawa of Kuamoʻo, the Battle of Kuamoʻo. And for anyone out there who have missed it, in our first KuaMoʻolelo episode, we went kind of in depth in telling more of the battle, the history of the battle. We even watched a video of my tutu kind of talking about it. So if you like, you can go check out that episode, see it in greater detail. We looked at lineages of different ali'i, all kinds of stuff John Osorio was sharing. And so all of that is there. And I think Kelsey is going to put the link in the Facebook or the link if anyone wants to go see that down the line. But tonight, we're taking a little different, following one different star, getting to one different island and thinking about this battle. And, obviously, just really quickly, this battle of Kuamoʻo, really very pivotal time, very uncertain time in the history of Hawaii. Different factions kind of, developed. One side was, kind of saying, maybe after Kamehameha had passed, maybe Pau, maybe no need the same ho'omana akua, and the other side, said, no, we're going to kind of kupa'a in this. And, it ended in a battle, really. And we're not making judgments on either side. The future was uncertain and, such a pivotal time in our history. We're in the midst of kind of waves of epidemics and depopulation, and there's a whole bunch of uncertainty there. But, eventually with that loss of our ho'omana and, the changes that come out of that part in the battle of the time, how does it, change perhaps some of the relationships between Kanaka and Aina? If we think about it, that loss, what happens when you abandon the akua and changes, the way maybe we view akua in what we consume, akua in what we eat, our relationships to the Aina itself, when there's no longer one uhane in that tree and it's just a piece of lumber, you treat it different, right? And so sometimes we might think about, that fall of the kapu system and aikapu, as being maybe around the eating stuff and separation of men and women. But, I think there's these deeper layers, that kind of we can stick around and think about here as we changed and lost that kind of aikapu system. So part of what we were delving into is thinking about, that the aikapu system is kind of a system of resource management also. When we saw ku was in, the aveoveo and the redfish and, kanaloa in the mai'a. And when we transitioned from that, it was a system that actually, regulated access of resources. It dictated kapu, at certain times and paying very close attention to the spawning cycles of i'a. And I remember that many years ago when we had the Kuikapono marches, all the aveoveo were blooming, all these baby aveoveo all across Hawaii. And I remember, I was just in my 20s, but I remember everybody sharing the stories, and it was a little bit different times on different islands. And so that system of ho'omana, I think, that aikapu kept many of those things in place. But one thing certainly we haven't lost, right, is our connection to Aina, Aina as kupuna, as ancestor, and maybe, some of perhaps our daily chants and our activities. I eat with wahine all the time. I like it. Some of that maybe has changed, but our relationships to Aina and I think uncovering, is sacred what we eat. What we consume means something. And Aina feeds us physically, mentally, spiritually. And so, why does Aina matter? You know, I think it brings up all of these sort of issues embedded in maybe what our kupuna were battling for at the time, that connection between Kanaka and Aina, Aina as a kua, you know, and Aina as ancestor. So we're going to delve into, you know, this conversation tonight, but I wanted to ask if our panelists, you know, maybe want to add to some of my framing and thoughts and conversation about, you know, why Aina matters.
One of the things that popped up into my head was when Kekua Okalani did what he did. The result was there was some kind of a huge loss, a huge void that was created. And it seems like ever since then to now, you know, there's this feeling of we have no control, we're losing the vibe, we're poisoning this, it's like a downhill kind of a thing. And I think Kaho'olawe became like a huge part of that. How much more are you going to lose? It was in your face destruction, sadness, loss, those kinds of things. So I see this whole thing as a continuation, but in there, in my old age, I start to smile a lot now because there's hope. There's huge hope going on. And I can see it. I can see the new leaders coming, and they got so much more mana'o than we ever had. We had to learn everything about who we were, not from Kamehameha schools, but from our kupuna. If it wasn't for our kupuna, we would have been totally lost. And then whoever created this place at the university, you know, kudos to them, because that was like the watering hole for us really learning about who we were. When they started bombing Kaho'olawe and we went over there, we saw the destruction of all of the things of our kupuna built. And that was our library, because we never had a written language. Nobody was telling us about our history, who we were. It was the things that the kupuna left behind. And to see that being targeted and blown up just blew our minds. So I just wanted to link the feelings that must have been happening back then about the loss and how we were losing losing generation after generation. And then now there's this feeling of us learning who the hell we are and what is our kuleana, you know, what does this Aina mean to us and all these kinds of things. So there's hope in the air right now. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, we gotta have hope. Auntie Noinoy, you want to add some mana'o reflections?
Sure. Yes. So, you know, I think that while we can't change our history and the events that took place during those years, we can certainly learn from them and study them. And that's what scholars like yourselves and others have been doing, and really analyzing, you know, what took place in our own society here. And part of that society was the shift in our not only in our practical everyday lives, but in our spirituality and our relationships, right? And so when all of this took place and the battle was lost by Kekuaokalani Manono and their followers, I think for me, spirituality shifted. And although it occurred with the arrival of missionaries the following year, not immediately, it just began that path, and it seemed to create an atmosphere that was ripe for Christianity to enter into Hawaii. What that did for our people, I think, was brought our spirituality indoors. So we're no longer connected to our environment and to the elemental forces, which is what Aikapu is really based on. And so, and all of the structure of Aikapu was based on our Kanaka relationship with Aina. So now we've shifted into and morphed into a new kind of spirituality, which took our people away from that and moved it indoors, moved it into, you know, into buildings and into a different framework that literally in one generation, as we know, we can lose a lot of wealth and information, a lot of Ike and information. And that's what began to happen. So, you know, the whole series of events, which included the interchange with Western society, the introduction of the cash economy to Hawaii, the removal of our kane, particularly from the Aina, where they were you know, the ones that brought the strength to the Aina and the connection and created the food resources for the families. You know, all of those events took place over a really short time in our history. And as I often say to people, you have to say your grandparents' names to your children every day, because can you imagine not naming your grandparents ever to your children or your grandchildren? They will lose that information in just that one generation, and much of that was lost. So as Walter says, you know, we have since the 60s, when we were both at the same school that taught us to be really good Americans, along with Kamana, your family, and your grandmother, who, by the way, was our kumu as well, and we love her dearly. That since the 70s and the time of Kahoʻolawe and the resurgence of interest in our culture and the sacrifices made by a whole generation of people to recover our Ike Kupuna, to recover our language, to recover our traditional ways, our voyaging practices, return of Kahoʻolawe, all of those things. And mele, resurgence of mele oli, all of those things have brought us to where we are today. And thank goodness for that. Yeah. Thank goodness for a new generation of my children and their peers who now are fluent in our language again, after 3 generations of us grew up without the language. So yeah, there are good times coming. And I think Walter and me, we just still happy we're here to witness at least part of it, right, Walter?
Right on.
Mahalo, mahalo, Auntie Noinoy. Yeah, I think that is so powerful to think about that transition, and yeah, the changes in our spirituality and the timing is amazing. Yeah, thank you. Kapua, you want to add to
Oh,
that?
how does one follow up after that, right? I mean, all I can say is, well, aloha, right? I mean, that's what your tutu said. I think there's so much about the Battle of Kuamoʻo. It's hard to know where to begin. I think it was really, for me, so emblematic of the hulihia, of the huliel of that time. And ironically, I feel like we're at a really similarly critical juncture again now. And, you know, Manono, Kapuaʻala, what I'll call the resistance, was struggling to maintain our traditional knowledge, our values, our ways of knowing and being. And if I think about it in the context of so many things, like including Native Hawaiian law, which is so much of what I do, that battle was crucial. It shaped the trajectory of history where we are today with respect to everything. And so much of my work, so much of your work, Kamana, is grounded in that, right? What's the kanawai? What's traditional customary Native Hawaiian rights? Uncle Walter and Auntie Noinoy have talked about hope for the next generation. And I have the same hope. I mean, I feel like the old person, and to see the next generation coming up, working in Native Hawaiian law in particular, fluent, being able to do the research in so many different ways. It's hopeful where we have this repository of knowledge that we can explore and that we can make our own, that we can reclaim. And I guess one thing that I think about too, touching upon what Auntie Noinoy said is, I think about myself compared to my grandpa. So my grandpa was Lawaiʻa, he was a Konahiki. He could be like, you feel that? That's a KY wind, it's gonna rain. I mean, that was an intimacy with which he knew the Aina. And I was raised in that, gathering, all of that sort of thing, but I'm not a practitioner in the same way. I've had to become a legal practitioner, which sucks. People shouldn't have to be like in court and in different kind of stuff, but that's also some of the kuleana that we've had to awamo, to be able to do that, to stand for our vai, to stand for our mauna, all of the things that make Hawaii truly special. And so for me, I had to spend too much time on Oahu and indoors, right, doing that kind of thing. And so the silver lining for the pandemic for me has been to be able to be home for the past 2 years with my kids, to be able to raise them here, the same place where I was, fishing, to pick limu, to learn the winds and the stars and all of that kind of stuff. And so I think for Kanaka, that's really shaped who I am. And I think for the next generation, we need to go beyond the book knowledge and we need to go back to the place-based knowledge. And what concerns me is how much has been lost. We still have a lot there, but I think about like the amount of knowledge my grandpa had compared to, the amount of knowledge that we have now. And so we have a lot to reclaim. We have resources to help us do that, but I feel like we're at a really critical juncture where we have to do that in order for us to continue to thrive and to maintain and to reclaim what we have. But I have hope that we can do that. I think we just need to, I think for a lot of generations, we've had to sacrifice. Not uncle, he's always been in Pelekunu, but I was sacrificed to Oahu in order to do this work. And I look forward to being able to be home and to continue the work, but in a new and different way.
Mahalo for opening this up, everybody. And that hope, I think, is so critical and important because we're in a hulihia now in many ways, these radical shifts and changes all around us, and grounding ourselves in the ike, the wisdom, the values of our kupuna, trying to keep our love malama ko aloha, for each other, for our ho'apaio. And and I think, the kupa on Oahu too, so inspiring. I think of your kane, Kapua, the whole family, Uncle Danny guys, the guys, Uncle Eric Enos guys. Just so many kupa of our islands, that have stood up and maintained our place, our streams, our lo'i, our opelu. Really, really hopeful and inspiring. And so I want to kind of dig in a little bit deeper. And, in all of your lives, all of you have, committed and sacrificed, so much energy, so much time, so much mana, to care for and advocate for our Aina and Kanaka. And so maybe we can start with Uncle Walter. Why does Aina matter to you? And how did you? I can see you look back on these movements just the other day. The GMO issue. You were out front on that, and now finally comes to disclose. Spraying poison on the Aina, we're harming the Aina. You've made these conscious decisions, Uncle, to devote yourself, to commit yourself to doing this work, to care for Aina. And, why? Maybe you can share a personal experience or a pivotal moment, why did you decide to do this? Why do you keep doing this incredible work, Uncle Walter?
I was sitting on a panel on Maui one time, and the guy asked the question to say, what one word would you use to describe all the things that you've done or doing? And everybody was like, oh, what is that? How do you describe this in one word. And the word I came up with was survival. And until this day, I feel I picked the right word. You know, how the hell are you going to survive in the middle of the Pacific continent on little dots of islands? It's not going to be easy. And we're finding out that it's really, really difficult. So I guess, you know, without the Aina, how are we going to survive in this blue continent? So yes, Aina matters. And people been trying to dissect this word Aina and come up with meanings. And out of 10 people, you can have 10 different definitions of Aina. And they'll probably be all right. I remember the day we came off Kaho'olawe, and this guy was going around saying, Aloha Aina, Aloha Aina. Aloha Aina means we got to pick up the rubbish on the road. And we just came from, you know, being handcuffed. And so there's a huge gap or a huge definition of this word Aina, and everybody's right at the different levels. So like I said earlier, you know, when people start saying hello to each other and saying, hey, Aloha Aina, that shows that we're on the right path in trying to figure out how we're going to survive.
Alo, Uncle.
I have plenty of stories, but we don't want all night, so I'm not going to talk too much.
Well, keep them in you when you're ready. You might come back around. So
Okay.
you know, how about you know, Auntie Noinoy, you shared some of your convictions and reflections for, you know, raising keiki in kupa spaces and sharing time on Aina and Ohana. You know, was there a pivotal moment for you that you kind of made this conscious decision? I mean, you've, like Uncle Walter, stood on the mauna and risked a lot, professionally, personally, sacrificed time away from family, you know, to be up there. Yeah, can you share, Auntie?
Sure. So, you know, Puakanahele is my me'e. She's my mentor, my kumu. And she often says that if these islands, if these little tiny islands in the middle of the North Pacific, if they no longer existed, we would no longer exist as Hawaiians, that our whole identity as Kanaka are to these islands, these lands that we call home. And so I actually did a study on that to get my PhD when I decided, after I had worked my whole life, I wanted to go back to school. And I did, and I went to University of Waikato in Aotearoa in order to get my PhD. My studies were actually based at Hawaii Community College, where I worked with Native Hawaiian students, and what I came to really understand through those studies is that the more our students, our Kanaka students, understand their relationship to the Aina and to their own heritage, to our heritage, the more they understand that, the more they embrace that, the better equipped they are to deal with those Western structures and Western forces that they have to deal with on a daily basis. And going through the university system, of which the community college is a part of it, is probably the most hostile place, one of the most hostile places for Kanaka that you can even imagine here in Hawaii, and I'm sure elsewhere. And many of our Kanaka, we know, go off to school. They think, you know, they want a new experience, finish high school here, they go off to Aina A to try and get a higher education and come right up against a completely foreign environment. So maybe we'll all speak the same English, and maybe some of the food is recognizable, but you know, there's a real limit to their experience in these foreign places. So the whole theory of my studies and my work in my recent years, the last few decades, has been about that relationship that we have with Aina. It's inseparable. It's for us Kanaka, our relationship and our identity with Hawaii, with this particular Aina, is inseparable. When you remove people from this Aina, you are removing their kahua, their entire foundation. And if they aren't equipped to deal with that alienation, then they will flounder. And so Kamana, you and I spend practically every Wednesday night meeting on another forum for Aina Aloha Economic Futures, right? And that is the reason for that, the reason for being on the Mauna is because we have to maintain this place to be the place where our people can live and can continue to live. So whether it's protecting our resources like Mauna Kea or our vai, like what's happening right now on Oahu, or GMO, which is what Walter stands up for. Those are so important for us to remain here as Kanaka and for this to remain our home, not tourists, not visitors who think that this is a spectacular place to spend their money and to enjoy, you know, this utopian lifestyle that they conjure up. But for us, we have no other place to go. And I worry about those 10,000 Kanaka who have moved away from Hawaii in the last decade for economic reasons, for jobs, and because the cost of housing here is so high. So yeah, it's all, there you have it. That's why Aina is important.
Mahalo. Mahalo, Auntie Noinoy. Yeah. You can see the commitment, the dedication, the time, and yeah, keeping, you know, that lineage, that connection to our Aina that keeps, you know, a place for our people, you know, not easy work, not easy work. Kapua, you know, I working alongside you, you know, looking up to you, seeing the multiple avenues that you advocate for our people with traditional and customary rights with Hawaii. I mean, from, you know, bringing your students out onto the Aina, doing clinics, filling out forms for communities, providing primers, creating the trias for, you know, traditional customary rights, Native Hawaiian law. You mentioned your grandfather, you know, and being inspired by that and his connection. So why, you know, was there a moment you committed to doing this work, or what motivates you to ho'omau?
I don't know that there was a single moment. I feel like my whole childhood was pivotal. Growing up in a rural Maoli community, because that's what the North Shore of Kauai was at that time. It's not anymore. There are pockets, but at that time, the whole North Shore was, you know, it was fishers and farmers in the same families from many, many generations. And it was also a time of hulihia. That's when the plantations here stopped growing cane and started planting houses. And so there was tremendous transition, and my parents were super engaged in ensuring that we had a local perspective, but a Maoli perspective in particular, you know, at lots of different fora, before the Planning Commission, with the general plan amendments, like all kinds of stuff. And I have so many memories of being a little girl, and my parents always seemed to be in community meetings, like always. And so I'd be playing outside in the dark with all these other little kids at the neighborhood center, which ironically, you know, it's all the same people doing the work today. Mihana Blake Vaughn, my sister who runs the White Paw Foundation, like all, you know, we're all kind of still doing this work. But at that time, as a little kid, I'm thinking to myself, like, how come we gotta go to all of these meetings to stop people from developing our community? And how come we don't have attorneys who can stand shoulder to shoulder with us on these issues and help us to navigate these processes, which are, I mean, nobody should have to read administrative rules or understand the contested case hearing process and all of that kind of stuff, right? I have so many different, tons of these memories though, you know, playing outside, sitting with my grandma on a hill when my dad and my uncle and my papa are rounding up our pee-pee because the land was being sold. And I remember asking my grandma, like, well, how come we didn't just buy it? And this is in the 70s, right? So she's like, oh, because it was $750,000, which at that time was like an unfathomable amount, right? Now you cannot even get one single family home on Kauai for that. That's a deal. I remember sitting with my mom and my sisters in the parking lot that I think was Kuamoʻo Plaza while my dad was negotiating with the Kamehameha trustees because they didn't want to lease Waipa'a to a Native Hawaiian nonprofit, thinking to myself, like, what the heck, when we really needed land for Aina for farming, for, you know, open space, not just another luxury development. So I think it's a culmination of all of those experiences and more that helped convince me that I needed to do this work. And I'm just grateful for all the opportunities. I mean, I think of the amazing places I've gotten to go pick shells with Uncle Walter and Auntie Scarlett and everybody else at La'au Point, and to, you know, or all in the bushes and different places on Molokai, or, you know, explore the kahalands of North Kona with Auntie Hannah and the Kealanis, or, you know, Novai Eha with so many different ohana. So I've been blessed to be able to do this work. And I look, and I'm heartened by the next generation that I see coming forward who can do it like even better.
Mahalo, mahalo, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Powerful stories to share with our lehu out there. And I think Kelsey is sending me messages. I think someone asked if I could respond to my own question. And the answer is no. No, you know, this is really about the panelists tonight, but you know, I guess for me, it's really my tutu, and you know, I was only mo'opuna, so I was punahele by default, like I often say. Good thing my Uncle Keola never had kids. I probably would have lost as punahele, but I think just being around her and hearing the stories and the mo'olelo and the chants, and I was a super shy kid, terrified, you know, she would be performing. She always had one workshop, one something, you know, and so I was like just going everywhere, and I would just be like, oh, I don't like being in front of people. I was so shy, so scared, but I just saw her courage, and I saw her love for Hawaii in this place, and I knew I just wanted to try to be a little bit like that, you know, and make her proud. And so, yeah, so I think for me that relationship with her, ironically, Kuamoʻo, when I was high school, I was playing football, and we had football camp, and the big deal, you know, it was so narrow vision, but all I cared about was throwing touchdowns. And my tutor said, no, you got to come home to Hawaii Island. My great grandma we're going to see where she was born. And so we drove all around. We spent time with different families on Hawaii Island, and really, really powerful experience. But Kuamoʻo, actually, I remember going back and seeing that, and, you know, the night before in Kona crying, and my Uncle Keola, my grandma's brother, making, you know, lehala, and everybody sharing this story, and just feeling like, yeah, we gotta do something, you know, we gotta protect this place. So so we all have, you know, I'm learning so much from your folks' stories and dedication, you know, to Aina. And I want to transition to, you know, this next question.
Before you do that.
Oh, yes, Uncle.
I know you asked me that question earlier, and I never even I went around the bush, and I never said. I said the wrong things.
You said great things, but share more.
So just to get to know what happened to myself, you know, after getting out of Kamehameha schools, I had to go home on Molokai, and like I said, I got into political problems, became a hunter in order to survive. So because I couldn't get a job, I would share my meat with the guy who got to fix my car and all that kind of stuff. So survival was critical. And because access, we couldn't survive without access. We didn't have to own the land. We just had to be able to use the land. And Kamehameha made his great law, Kanawai, giving us safety on these trails so that we could go and feed our families. So that became critical for myself because, you know, the stupid deer, they couldn't read no trespassing signs and keep out signs. And if I was going to be a hunter, I have to follow the deer. So it wasn't my fault that I was getting arrested all the time for trespassing, but I was just trying to survive. So because of that, we organized our community. We had hundreds of people to march. The first time Hawaiians ever went march besides diving for coins, that people throw off the ships and stuff like that and smiling and giving lays. We actually protested our rights of access. And that became a big deal. We didn't know it was a big deal, but it became a big deal. So that I got a phone call from Charlie Maxwell saying, hey, you want to come to Kaho'olawe? I said, well, what for? He said, because, and I said, no, I don't think so, too far. I don't want to go. He said, well, we need a hunter. I said, oh, I come in, yeah. Somebody got to go hunting and feed everybody while we're doing this protest on Kaho'olawe. So that's how we got involved with Kaho'olawe. And then after all of that action, going to jail and all this kinds of stuff, and having Senator Noinoy give me a pardon 1 week after I got out, after 6 months. Anyway, I got tired of being in jail, so I moved my whole family in January to Pelikunu Valley. And people got all pissed off with me because, oh, I was deserting the ohana, you know, running away from everything. And I got blamed for all kinds of stuff. But George and I were going around because George worked for Hawaiian Airlines and he could get free passes. And I went as his brother and I had free passes. And we would go and track down kupuna because we were trying to find out where is the mana. Where does the mana that the Hawaiians had? Because on Molokai, you talk to the kupuna back then, the stories just make your hair stand up. So where did all this mana come from? So we went from island to island, talking to all different kupuna. And if at least 3 kupuna said the same thing, then we would believe that as the true story of our ancestors. So from Pelikunu, I went into Pelikunu because we were talking to kupuna and it only took us so far. So I wanted to go and find out where our kupuna, when they first came to Hawaii, where did they go? They never go west end where no more water. They went into the valleys. So I figured if I'm going to learn about our kupuna, I got to go into the valleys. And that was the best times of my life. I mean, I was like on cloud 9. It was heaven. The problem was we had a radio, transistor radio back then. And these guys was on the radio saying that they're forming the Office of Hawaiian Affairs in order for us to control the Hawaiians. And I spent 3 months over there trying to figure out how we're going to advance ourselves as Hawaiians. And it wasn't the state forming some entity to control us. So I got all pissed off and I left the valley and I ran for Oha. You know, and because I wanted the truth to come out. So the second thing that happened to me was Auntie Frenchie Di Soto called me on the phone and said, hey boy, you gotta come Oahu. I said, well, what's up? We have a con. I said, well, what the hell is that? She said, get over here. So I told my wife, oh, Hana, I went Honolulu for a couple of days. Auntie Frenchie like me come over there. So I went over there. After 2 days, I called my wife, hey, hon, send me some clothes. I'm gonna be here for a while. Because Auntie Frenchie asked me, hey, boy, what you like? I said, we gotta have access in the law. She said, access in the law? I said, yeah. She said, okay, go. So I had access to all of the lawyers and all of the, and we came up with Article 12, Section 7. And at first we never liked him because he says the state can control it in some way, but we couldn't get past the Constitution. So we had to add that part in there. So that was pretty cool. And then of course we formed OHA. And then I ran for OHA, got in, it didn't take long. I was hunting deer. They charged me for felony charges for hunting deer at night and all this kind of stuff. And they kicked me out. So that was a short-term political action on my part. So I went back home and got into all of these battles to try and protect the water, battles to try and make sure that the tourists don't take all of our fishing grounds. So that's basically my story. It wasn't like one hurrah, it was like one thing after the other, and you just keep going. And then my last good fun venture was going up to the Mauna, and that was like, yeah. What I saw up at the Mauna was this next generation that was organizing a whole community on this barren you know? And I was thinking, wow, man, they got it. So for me, it was like, okay, I'm gonna help them out a little bit, then I'm going home because these guys, they get the act together. So basically, I'm a little old man over here on Molokai, watching all these young people just going at it. People like Dr. that's doing this show tonight, you know? I mean, he went from being a shy kid, just playing football, to somebody who now is getting this Zoom thing under control so that us as Hawaiians, we can progress during these bad times of the COVID and all of that. So anyway, that's my story from the man, from the old man on Molokai who's watching the young generation and saying, "Imoa, you guys, imoa."
Mahalo, Uncle Walter. Yeah, mahalo for sharing. And when we was talking earlier, Kalamai said the wrong valley, so Pelekunu. Kumujan Kaimikawa, I was in and with Kapua's Kane in his halau, and we even learned some of the Molokai stuff. So important to get our ahupua'a right. So excuse me, Pelekunu, and wow, what a powerful time and story. Mahalo, Uncle Walter. Yeah, you know, doing the best we can with this Zoom thing. But it is nice to be able to share, and that's why we thought, hey, Walaʻau, you know, web Walaʻau series, we can do them. We can just, you know, get together and talk story and share, you know, so important, and be safe. And, you know, our last question, I think we're touching on it in different ways, but, you know, when I think about it, it brings up sort of some different ideas. And, you know, the question is, you know, what do you want your mo'opuna to know about why Aina matters? You know what? We can see out. I mean, yeah, who'd like to start us off on that one? You guys teaching your mo'opuna now, so.
Yeah, I'll say something. I think for me, it's not just my mo'opuna for young people. I would like for our next generation and generations to follow to know how to live with the entire spectrum, to be able to come here on these kinds of webinars and talk to each other in smart ways, to be as educated in the Western system as they are in our own cultural knowledge and cultural heritage and ike kupuna. And what we're trying to do in our family is to make sure that the generations after us know, like Walter's family, that your food comes from the ʻāina. And yes, we can go to the grocery store, but we can, if that grocery store no more food, we know how to grow our food. We know how to hunt, to raise animals, how to kill pig. This week we're doing imu for the holidays. You know, we don't want those those skills and that knowledge of our relationship with Aina to be lost. And so I know it's hard to do when you live in a condominium in urban Oahu, but to the extent that we can keep those skills and that knowledge and that kind of activity in our families, we need to do that.
Mahalo. Mahalo, Auntie Noinoy.
So as a kupuna, I gotta keep telling myself, you're a kupuna, you're a kupuna. Act like you're a kupuna. Stop being so. Anyway, I think that in order for me to teach my mo'opuna, they're gonna have to learn by watching action. So we're building fish ponds, and then we're finding out that you cannot really just work on your fish pond because when the thing rain, all the soil come down, fill up your fish pond. Okay, so maybe we better look at this thing called the ahupuaʻa, and we better restore this ahupuaʻa. Otherwise, no sense we even do the fish pond, because Aina is from the mountain, the air, the water, the mulivai, the reef, the ocean. That's all Aina. That's all the things that we need in order to survive. So in my mind, I got to keep active and teach the next generation and the mo'opuna especially by doing those kinds of things and making them part of it. So when we first did the fish pond, they said, okay, come up with a business plan and then maybe we can give you some funding. How much fish can you grow and how many per square foot and what is the price at the market? And we fell for that. We went and spent a whole year doing one stupid market study when the fish pond is just to feed you. And it's natural. Everything is natural. The water gets changed twice a day because the moon no stop. And all these kinds of stuff. So it's actually doing that I plan to teach my mo'opuna.
Wow. Mo'opuna's out there for us, but theoretical mo'opuna.
Tell you, hard to go last. They already said it all. But I think even harder, as Kamana just said, to imagine. My kids are 6 and 8, so I can't even imagine more at this point. But what would I like them to know about why Aina matters? I want them to know it, to feel it in their na'au, to grow their own food, to gather, makahanakaike, right? I want them to know their Aina, the mo'olelo, the mele, the oli, the names, and then, hakunukain, because our tradition continues to grow and continues to evolve. And especially, I think, given our new climate reality and all the other issues that we're facing, that's when, to me, this is when being in a place for a millennia matters, and all of this biocultural knowledge that we have needs to come together to help us continue to not just survive, but really thrive here. So that's my mana'o from the simple girl from the country after what the little old man from Molokai said.
That's fantastic. Makahanaka ike, connected to Aina, rooted, grounded, feeling the signs, being able to navigate these other technical worlds that they're going to be a part of. Yeah, that's beautiful. And, because of your guys' work and all the haumana, the people that learn from you and follow you, for me, I know Hawaii is still going to be like that. I know that those places and spaces, going to be available for the generations to come because of your folks' dedication and aloha and courage. I just want to mahalo each of you so much. I only learned a little bit about that, but when I see your guys' lives and I hear these mo'olelo, just reminds me of how important it is to have that courage and keep our aloha. So I want to continue this conversation in person at a future date, if you guys don't mind. But in order to keep our schedule, I think we're gonna kind of transition now. And it's been a really ono, momona conversation tonight. And I want to thank you folks. Our mahalos really is to each of you for, spending this time with us and sharing, your personal mo'olelo and convictions and for your incredible work for Aloha Aina, for our people and our place. I'm proud to walk the honua at this time, with each of you. We want to mahalo our cross-posting partners, Kanaiokana, Aina Momona, ʻŌiwi TV, Kuaʻaina Ulua Wamo, Hawaii People's Fund, Hawaii Nui Akea, and Hawaii Pono'i Coalition. Mahalo nui for helping us to get our broadcast out. And also want to mahalo, Native Books for the donations. Want to mahalo Malia Nobriga Oliveira for her technical assistance, teaching us how the heck we was going to stream. We never even knew how to stream before Malia. So thank you, Malia, for figuring it out for all of us. Want to mahalo all the faces out there that I cannot see. And the audience, the Kanaka out there working for our Aina in the midst of sometimes not easy situations. Thank you for your work. Last, just reminder, you can scan this QR code and it'll take you to our survey. You can win the raffle. And please don't forget to follow us. I think I skipped that slide. You can follow us at Instagram at Aloha Kuamoʻo Aina, or also on Facebook at Aloha Kuamoʻo. Stay tuned for our next episodes, and give us your feedback on these surveys. Tell us how we can improve, what you want to see in the future. Wow, thank you everybody. Let's do it in person soon, but we will have this recorded in perpetuity. So 10 generations from now, they're going to remember Kapua. I want to be on your team in the future. So, okay, main thing.
So the
the
battle of Kuamoʻo continues.
That's right. Battle of Kuamoʻo continues. Yeah. We have a shirt, Fight Like Kekuaʻalani, Love Like Manono, and we're also doing the other Fight Like Manono, Love Like Kekuaʻalani. So we're going to ho'oma, we're going to come out, we're going to continue. Thank you, Uncle Walter. Thank you, Auntie Noinoy. Mahalo, Kapua. I'm going to send us out with a little bit of mele music and hallelujah.